You were loyal to everyone, except yourself. It started so early, you can't remember when. A parent's sigh, a teacher's frown, the way someone you loved praised your silence more than your honesty. And you learned. Not in books, not in words, but in the skin-tightening stillness of moments where love felt like something earned by disappearing. You became attentive, not to your own hunger, but to the moods of others. You studied the room like a hunter, always scanning, always adjusting. You sharpened your smile, dulled your edges, and learned to vanish without leaving. They called you easy to be around. They meant you asked for nothing. Even now, you catch yourself doing it, changing tone mid-sentence when someone looks away, nodding when you disagree, offering warmth when your chest is cold. You betray yourself so smoothly, so professionally, that even your own mind has forgotten what it truly wanted. You gave your time, you gave your weekends, you gave your energy when you had none, showed up when you were crumbling, and said yes when every bone in your body begged for no. You learned to love like a service. You confused being chosen with being good. You were praised for it. Of course you were. The world loves those who bleed politely, those who don't ask for more than a smile in return, those who feel like home because they never lock the door. But a quiet resentment began to build. At first, you mistook it for tiredness, then for guilt. You told yourself you weren't grateful enough. You tried harder. You offered more. And still, something in you recoiled, not from others, but from the life you were stitching together from scraps of approval. Because deep down, a truth clawed at you. Loyalty without boundaries is not love. It is self-abandonment. It is the slow erosion of self until nothing remains but echoes of who others needed you to be. And the cost? You forgot what it feels like to want something without shame. You forgot what your voice sounds like when you don't filter it through someone else's comfort. You forgot the strange, holy violence of saying no without explanation. You lost hours, years, in rooms where your presence was currency and your soul was collateral. And now you sit in the aftermath, surrounded by people who think they know you, who love the version of you that never said, "This hurts me," who trusted you would always say yes, always smile, always stay. But part of you is leaving now, isn't it? Not loudly, not in anger, just slipping away, like mist in the morning. And here lies the paradox. The more you begin to return to yourself, the more disloyal you will seem, to them, to the stories you built together, to the masks that once fit like skin. You will disappoint. You will confuse. You will lose people, not because you are cruel, but because you finally decided to be honest. And your honesty will sound like betrayal to those who only loved your silence. So, you hesitate, at the edge of change, at the edge of truth, because you were loyal to everyone, except yourself. And now you wonder, who are you when no one is watching? If something in you awakened tonight, quietly, without permission, you may subscribe, only if you feel you must. Sometimes, the body remembers before the mind does. It shows you intention, in the way your shoulders remain raised, even in sleep, in how you flinch, not from blows, but from expectations, how you dread the ringing of your phone, the unread message, the polite request wrapped in obligation. They call it adulthood. You call it exhaustion. You perform. Always have. But now the mask feels heavier, not because it changed, but because you're finally beginning to feel its weight. You start to see that the version of you they loved was never really you. It was the version that adapted, that adjusted, that flattered, that folded itself neatly into other people's needs, like a letter never sent to yourself. You remember the moments you said nothing, not out of kindness, but fear. Fear of taking up space, fear of seeming difficult, fear that if you voiced your pain, you'd be seen not as someone hurting, but as someone inconvenient. And what is more unbearable than being a burden? So you became the opposite. You became dependable, predictable. You became the person who always helped move the furniture, who always stayed late, who always remembered birthdays. But when your own sadness leaked through, when your needs rose up uninvited, there was silence. They called you strong, but they never asked how it felt to hold everything alone. And now, there is this quiet rebellion in you. You decline the call, you cancel the plan, you walk away from a conversation that once demanded your full performance. And it stings, not because it's wrong, but because for the first time, you're doing something unfamiliar, listening to yourself. The voice is faint, almost forgotten, like a song you used to love but haven't played in years. And as it grows louder, something else begins to shrink. The part of you that lived for their approval. The part that equated love with sacrifice. The part that thought being needed was the same as being seen. You look back sometimes, at the people who don't call anymore, at the friends who grew distant the moment you stopped carrying their weight. You wonder if you were ever truly loved, or if they simply loved the version of you that never asked for anything in return. And you begin to grieve, not just the relationships, but the years. The moments you swallowed your own hunger to feed others. The nights you sat in silence while your own heart begged for attention. You grieve the self you betrayed, over and over, for the sake of harmony. But there is something sacred in that grief, because it is the beginning of truth. And truth, unlike loyalty, does not demand your silence. You do not have to hate them or blame them. Most of them never asked you to disappear, but you did, over and over. You made yourself small in the name of love. And now you are learning that love, real love, does not require your erasure. You are not cruel for needing space. You are not selfish for saying no. You are not unkind for choosing peace over performance. You are simply remembering what you were before the world taught you to apologize for existing. And yet, the question lingers. If you stop being who they wanted, who will stay? If something in you awakened tonight, quietly, without permission, you may subscribe, only if you feel you must. There's a strange silence that follows your first honest no. Not the kind that comes with anger or argument, but the silence of absence. A silence where certain names stop appearing, where conversations dry up without your constant tending, where invitations no longer arrive because you stopped making others feel comfortable at your own expense. At first, it feels like failure. You've spent your life being the glue, the bridge, the steady shoulder. Now, without your effort, things fall apart. People withdraw, not because you harmed them, but because you stopped pretending, and pretending was the price of belonging. You walk through familiar places and feel unfamiliar in them. The coffee shop where you used to meet them. The group chat that now buzzes less. The birthdays you no longer organize. The secrets you no longer hold. You weren't just loyal to people. You were loyal to your role, the responsible one, the good one, the selfless one. And now you're becoming something dangerous. Someone with limits. Someone with preferences. Someone who is no longer willing to contort for proximity. And that threatens everything. You begin to notice how fragile some connections really were, held together not by mutual care, but by your silence. You see it clearly now. It wasn't love that kept you close to them. It was performance. It was habit. It was the quiet belief that being needed was safer than being known. But you are no longer safe. You are unpredictable. You are changing the rules mid-game. You are unlearning obedience in a world that rewards compliance with conditional affection. You find yourself alone more often, not lonely, just alone, sitting with your own voice, hearing how timid it sounds after years of repression. You try to ask yourself simple questions. What do I want? What do I feel? And the answers don't come easily. They arrive slowly, clumsily, as if emerging from a cave after years in the dark. Your real self, the one buried under layers of loyalty, doesn't rush to greet you. It watches first, waits to see if this time you mean it, if this time you'll stay. You realize how much of your life was noise you created to keep others happy, to avoid conflict, to distract yourself from the silence that always carried the question, who are you when no one else is asking you to be something? And the paradox cuts deep. The more honest you become, the more isolated you feel. Because the world has never been built for people who stop apologizing. They say they want authenticity, but only if it's comfortable. They say they love honesty, but only if it's gentle, edited, sugar-coated. So now you walk differently, not with pride, not yet, but with awareness of your patterns, of your longing, of your right to exist without explanation. You see the trap clearly now, being loyal to everyone, hoping someone would finally return the favor, but never realizing that no one could be loyal to the self you had abandoned. You begin to speak less, but more truthfully. You begin to rest, not out of exhaustion, but as an act of resistance. You begin to live, not for others, not for their stories, but for the quiet reclamation of your own. And yet, some nights are heavy. You miss the version of yourself who was loved by everyone, even if she never really existed. You miss the comfort of being wanted, even if it came with conditions. You miss the certainty of knowing your role, your place, your usefulness. But you also know you were loyal to everyone except yourself. And now, in this new silence, this strange beginning, one question remains. Can you love the one who stayed quiet the longest, even if no one else does? If something in you awakened tonight, quietly, without permission, you may subscribe, only if you feel you must. There is a moment, quiet, uneventful, when you no longer crave applause, not because you don't long to be seen, but because you have finally started seeing yourself. Not the polished mask, not the agreeable tone, not the curated version that made you lovable to others, but the one beneath all that, the restless one, the one that watched from behind your eyes as you said yes again, and again, and again. You wake up one morning and notice that you didn't rush to check your phone. No need to be available, no need to prove you are valuable through readiness. The silence isn't heavy anymore. It feels like air, like space, like the beginning of something not urgent, but real. You move slower. You speak less. And when you do, your voice no longer bends to avoid tension. You have tasted the bitterness of self-erasure. You have studied the hollow aftertaste of pleasing, and now your tongue refuses it. People don't know what to do with you. They say you've changed. They say you've grown distant. Some ask what's wrong, not out of care, but confusion, because they cannot place you anymore. You no longer reflect their image. You no longer nod by default. You are no longer their echo. And so, they leave, quietly, without drama, just less. You learn that not every loss needs mourning. Some losses feel like doors unlocking. You fill your time with different things now. A walk that ends without a purpose. A book you don't underline for later. Music that doesn't demand movement. You are no longer optimizing your existence for approval. You are simply here. And slowly, the absence of noise becomes a home. But there is something else that arrives with this silence. Something darker. Grief. Grief for the parts of you that you willingly offered up to be accepted. The dreams you postponed. The desires you denied. The boundaries you never built. The parts of you that curled up quietly so others could stretch out fully. You see it now with brutal clarity. They were not the thieves. You handed them the key. Not out of weakness, but habit. A learned instinct. A reflex born of survival. You thought love meant being useful. You thought connection required disappearing. And now that you're visible to yourself, you feel the weight of all those years where you were not. You do not blame them anymore. That was the old you, the one that still sought a villain to justify your pain. Now you know, it wasn't malice, it was misalignment. You chose people who mirrored your own belief, that you had to earn affection with sacrifice. You didn't choose them for who they were. You chose them because they fit the shape of your silence. And now, as that silence dissolves, so do they. This is not loneliness, this is cleansing. Still, a question remains, one that hums under your skin, especially on the days when solitude grows loud. If you are no longer what they needed, can you be what you needed all along? If something in you awakened tonight, quietly, without permission, you may subscribe, only if you feel you must. You start to feel strange in your own skin, not unwelcome, just unfamiliar. As if you've returned to a house you once lived in, only to find the furniture rearranged, the windows letting in a colder light. You walk through the rooms of your mind and notice things you left untouched for years. Anger, curled up like a child under a blanket. Joy, brittle from disuse. Desire, blinking in the dark like an animal that forgot how to hunt. It's not peace you feel, not yet. It's the echo of noise no longer present. For so long, your inner world was a theater, lit, busy, endless acts of agreement and endurance. Now the stage is empty, the lights are off, no one is watching, and the silence presses in, not like a threat, but like a question. If no one else is clapping, do you still perform? You used to define yourself by your proximity to others, how well you could hold them, how quickly you could guess what they needed, how little space you required in return. You were the calm in their chaos, the hand that steadied them. But you see it now. You were calm because you muted yourself. They mistook your quiet for strength, your stillness for grace. but you were just shrinking. You begin to hear your own voice again, but it's hoarse, unused. You speak and flinch at your own tone, unfamiliar with its sharpness. You ask for something and feel guilt instantly rise. You set a boundary and wait for the backlash. Sometimes it comes, sometimes they push back. Not violently, just subtly, with a sigh, a look, a pause in the conversation. Just enough to remind you, you were easier before. But something in you has changed, something old has cracked open, and now, even when you want to go back, you can't. Not because you've outgrown them, but because you've remembered what it feels like to belong to yourself. You begin to notice the moments where you once would have folded, the apology you almost gave, then didn't, the favor you almost offered, then withheld, not out of cruelty, not to punish, but to preserve. Because now you know, every yes must come from truth, or it is theft. Theft of time, of energy, of self. And you're tired of stealing from yourself. You begin to meet new people, slowly, carefully. Not with masks, but with caution. You no longer lead with performance. You no longer overexpose. You allow yourself to be boring, imperfect, quiet. Some leave, but some stay. Not because you impress them, but because you don't try to. You begin to taste a different kind of connection. One not built on usefulness, but presence. One where you can say, I don't have space for that today, and the world doesn't end. One where you can rest without guilt. The mirror is still uncomfortable. You look and search for who you used to be, the agreeable one, the smiling one, the reliable one, and she's fading. Not gone, but dissolving like ink in water. You miss her sometimes, not because you want her back, but because she kept you safe, in her way. She built the bridges, she kept the peace, she paid the price for love, over and over.